Welcome to the Disneyland Beat, where our toes tap to a Disneyland drum.
And we always whistle while we work.
The Disneyland Railroad is one of the most exhilarating and satisfying attractions in the park. To some, it's a stylish means of conveyance, but to so many, it is the destination itself.
Join us as we take a grand circle tour of Disneyland, allowing glimpses into the magic of each land while taking a close look at the history of the engines, the line, and the different train stations that are deeply intertwined with the stories and lives of Walt Disney and his Imagineers.
Like, subscribe, and stick around. All aboard!
The Disneyland Railroad is leaving the station.
Disneyland is your land.
Come seek an adventure into your pirates, eh?
Made the jump to life.
In the early 20th century, trains weren't just a means of transportation, they were a lifeline and critical to the development of the United States. Walt Disney's father, Elias, along with his uncle Mike, worked on the railroad, and this instigated Walt's fascination.
One of Walt's earliest jobs was as a news butcher for a few months in 1916, selling magazines and snacks on the Missouri Pacific, Kansas City Southern, and the Missouri Kansas Texas railroads. About this experience, Walt said, "My railroad career was brief, exciting, and unprofitable."
Little did he know that a number of his later successes would involve railroading in both his personal and professional lives. When the animation studio began to become successful, Walt was able to reconnect with his boyhood love of trains, and indeed so did several of his brilliant Imagineers.
In many ways, a model steam engine represents what makes Imagineering special. It requires precise technical knowledge of engines and metal fabrication combined with designed beautiful aesthetics and environments to create a fascinating and purposeful experience.
Walt was able to rekindle his love for trains through his friendships at the Walt Disney Company. Imagineers and Disney legends Kimball and Ollie Johnston and Walt Disney all had a special bond with each other, and each were lifelong fans of trains, and each created some of the first and best backyard-scale railroads on the West Coast.
Most say it started with Ward Kimball, who was a Disney animator and one of Walt Disney's 9 old men. Among his many achievements was the creation of Jiminy Cricket. Ward started with buying a boxcar to house his miniature train collection and ended up purchasing a real steam engine.
And over time, and with the help of many studio employees, he spent 3 years restoring the engine to working order and building a 500-foot-long main line in his backyard. Now, it's a safe bet that Walt would not have built his own backyard railroad if not for attending a steam-up or a railroad-themed party at Ward Kimball's house in 1945, where Walt had the opportunity to pilot Ward's engine, the Emma Nevada.
It was the first time he had ridden in the cab of a train since his days working for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. He loved it.
In July of 1948, Walt boarded a train to attend the Chicago Railroad Fair, where he had been invited to participate in the Wheels a Rollin' pageant, where classic trains paraded by. Walt was deeply moved by the recreation of the funeral train for the president he most admired, Abraham Lincoln.
Walt also visited the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan on his way back to California and was impressed and inspired by the attractions of the stunning museum, which includes a scale locomotive that pulled guests around the estate.
Upon his return, it seemed that Walt had gone train crazy, and he put himself into finishing his own scale railroad. The little train made its debut at the studio Christmas party that same year, and then it was installed and operated in Walt's own backyard. He named it the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, and it was a big hit with friends and family, and it was something that Walt really loved.
When the idea for Mickey Mouse Park and then Disneyland came around, Walt loved the idea of having several railroads included. In fact, a rail encircling the entire park was included in every early concept.
So it made sense that a railroad was one of the first acquisitions that Walt sought to make for the park. But when a long-planned sale fell through, with the park opening not too far away, Walt ended up challenging his own skilled employees to design and fabricate their own train in-house.
By using the skills gained from Walt's miniature railroad and making it the exact size as Ward Kimball's backyard railroad, they came up with a plan and designed and fabricated not 1, but 2 steam engines.
At the park on opening day, 2 engines proudly paraded around the tracks, and they still do so today, though 3 others have been acquired, and Disneyland now has 5 narrow-gauge steam engines.
Engine number 1, the CK Holliday, was named after Cyrus Kurtz Holliday, founder of the Atchison Topeka Railroad and Santa Fe Railroad, although the engine was known around the studio as Retlaw 1, which is Walter spelled backwards. Engine number 2 was named the EP Ripley.
In 1958, the Disneyland Railroad expanded with its 3rd steam engine, number 3, the Fred Gurley. Walt made this decision because 2 locomotives couldn't keep up with the demand for the attraction. The Fred Gurley is the oldest steam engine operating on the Disneyland Railroad. It was built by Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia in 1895.
Engine number 4, the Ernest S. Marsh, was added the following year on July 25, 1959, and was named for Ernest S. Marsh, the president of the Santa Fe Railroad at the time, though the engine was older, being built in 1925 by Baldwin Locomotive Works.
Nearly 50 years passed before the 5th steam engine would join the Disneyland Railroad. Engine number 5, the Ward Kimball, is unique among its fellow steam engines, as it was named not for an icon of the railroad, but for an icon of Walt Disney animation.
Disney legend Ward Kimball was proud to put the old 1902 engine into service at a ceremony in June of 2005. The Ward Kimball has a hidden Jiminy Cricket near the front of the engine that you can see from the passenger cars if you look hard enough.
The engines can be hooked up to any set of passenger cars, and Disneyland usually has 2 trains running with forward-facing seats and 2 trains with side-facing cars. At any point, any one of the engines could be pulling Lilly and Disney's famous parlor car, named the Lilly Belle, which was created as a VIP car for the train in 1974.
The stylish caboose has many elements designed by Lillian herself, who added family pictures and important items. She used the same stylish and luxurious Victorian charm she used when designing the Disney Studios apartment above the fire station on Main Street, USA. For both, she chose her signature classic cranberry red color theme.
It wasn't too long ago that the Lilly Belle was open to the public on every ride, but now access is more limited. A reliable way to see it is to purchase a seat on the Grand Circle Tour, which we hope will be happening again fairly soon. The excellent guided tour includes a ride round the rails on the Lilly Belle.
A lucky few can also sit up in the Tinder car of the railroad and chat with the engineers during the ride. Once the pandemic is over, this will return. All you have to do is ask a Main Street Station cast member, and if it's available, wait your turn and take a ride.
And we start our journey at Main Street Station. This iconic building is completely unpretentious and overwhelmingly charming. As you walk up the stairs, you get an amazing view of Town Square, where Walt gave his dedication speech at the park opening with his touching words, "To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land."
As you look across the tracks, you can see an old pump-style handcart built by the Kalamazoo Manufacturing Company, which was picked out by Walt himself in 1958. Main Street Station is a fine example of Second Empire-style architecture popular in North America in the late 19th century. Of the 4 train stations in the park, only the depots at Main Street and New Orleans Square are designed as nostalgic stations from America's past.
In fact, when the park opened, there were only those 2 train stations, and each one had a dedicated train that would make a full circle tour, returning guests to the same place from which they left. The Main Street Station had seated cars, but the Frontierland Station famously had cattle cars, in which guests would stand for the ride.
When a 3rd station was added a year later, the trains made more stops and began to be used not only as an attraction, but also as a way to get around the park.
Here we go! As the train pulls out from the station, you are riding the first attraction to become operable in Disneyland. The tracks follow the crest of a 12-foot berm that creates the perimeter of the park that was designed to maintain sight lines and keep the Disney magic inside and the rest of the world outside.
During the ride, I think it's fascinating to consider as Disneyland has grown, the railroad has been a significant influence on the design of several major park attractions. The spatial challenge of having to build show buildings and lands outside of the railroad's path has impacted and shaped Disneyland.
If it was not for the railroad, we might not have the first half of Pirates of the Caribbean, as the caves and tunnels travel guests through the basement and out under the railroad into the main show building.
Without the railroads, we might not have the stretching room in the Haunted Mansion, which in some ways is just a clever solution for traveling guests down and under the railroad to the main show building. Or what about the amazing immersive queue of Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, designed to do the same thing?
Or how about how the train's path and view was considered in the designs of Splash Mountain and It's a Small World, and how much ambiance the railroad adds to both of those attractions? We think in a roundabout way, the train has benefited the design of many signature attractions by providing the right obstacle for the Imagineers to overcome.
After leaving Main Street Station, the first stop on the Disneyland Railroad is New Orleans Square. The station features a number of buildings, including a functional water tower and a loading platform. Across the tracks from the loading station is the original Frontierland Depot.
It is a replica from the depot featured in the 1949 Disney film So Dear to My Heart. Walt Disney initially wanted to reuse the actual set piece that had been built for the film, but when he learned that Imagineer Ward Kimball had already installed it in his backyard for his railroad, Walt asked his designers to build a new one just like it.
As you wait for a train, you'll hear a telegraph clicking away. This is actually Walt Disney's opening day dedication speech being sent via Morse code out on all the wires. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world.
As we now head out through Critter Country, rounding the rivers of America, be sure to enjoy the most pastoral and beautiful part of your journey. Guests can take in the landscapes inspired by four of America's majestic rivers: the Mississippi, the Columbia, the Missouri, and the Rio Grande.
The northern border of the park used to be completely straight, and the train passed just north of the Living Desert and the Storybook Land canal boats. But added attractions and lands have changed that. When Galaxy's Edge was constructed, the train was rerouted, and it now makes a slight left turn to veer around the Resistance Forest.
There used to be a Fantasyland Railroad station from 1956 to 1966. The station had a festive pitched roof, and it was themed as a medieval court, just like the rest of the land at the time.
The Fantasyland station was removed to make room for It's a Small World in 1966, and years later, another was built nearby, coinciding with the opening of the Fantasyland Theater and Videopolis in 1985. It was rebuilt as the Toontown station when Mickey's Toontown opened in 1993.
If you've ever thought the Toontown train depot looked familiar, there's a reason. The station is an identical but stylized cartoon version of the New Orleans Square station. The station has a luggage area with the themed suitcases of Mickey and his pals.
As you head out from Toontown Station, you'll pass right through the brilliant facade of It's a Small World, allowing you to look down onto the animal topiaries and wave at the guests entering the famous boat ride. It's another magic moment.
The next section is themed to the scientifically driven agricultural world of tomorrow. You also pass by the monorail tracks and the defunct People Mover tracks, while getting some peekaboo views of Autopia.
The Viewliner, the fastest miniature train in the world, used to operate alongside the Disneyland Railroad in this area from 1957 and 1959, but it was removed to make room for the Matterhorn, motorboat cruise, submarine voyage, and monorail expansion.
The Disneyland Railroad makes one more stop in Tomorrowland before completing its tour, dropping guests off in the future before heading back to the past. The station is not too much more than a covered platform. It's essentially unchanged from when it was added to the line in 1958.
As you leave Tomorrowland Station and head back on your journey to Main Street, you get a theatrical and historical treat, a trip through the Grand Canyon and Primeval World attractions.
The Grand Canyon diorama was added in 1958, and it was the first enclosed attraction on the line, depicting scenes from the Grand Canyon in epic style. In 1966, the Primeval World was added to it, including several large animatronic dinosaurs that had been used in Disney's exhibits at the 1964 World's Fair.
This magical section of the ride, opened years before Jurassic Park was even a thought, has provided many guests with their earliest dinosaur memories.
As we pull back into the Main Street station, completing the full Grand Circle tour, we here at the Disneyland Beat have a new appreciation for the Disneyland Railroad, and for the love, the respect, the knowledge, passion, and creative energy that went into making it.
And we remember the young boy who loved railroads that made it all happen. To us, the railroad is the exposition for every adventure to be had at Disneyland.
That's it for us today. See you real soon, Mouseketeers.
See you real soon.